Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We've had 31 people register for this webinar. We're very pleased to have such a diverse group as well, folks who have attended Imagine and the Summit, and also folks who are probably wanting to catch up on all of the events that happen in Quebec City. So the title of our webinar today is Key Take-Home Messages, Imagine 2012 Conference on Co-operative Economics and the International Summit of Cooperatives. And if you just joined us, please press *2 to mute your line. Also note that if you'd like to ask a question throughout the webinar, we're going to save those until the end, and then we'll have time for discussion and questions. So please go ahead and send me your questions to the organizer, CCA Webinars, via your GoToWebinar menu. There should be a question box there. Today we've got Dr. Sonja Novkovic and from St. Mary's University, and Fiona Dogood, and myself, Erin Hancock, from the Canadian Co-operative Association. So to give you a little bit of background on our network, the Measuring the Cooperative Difference Research Network is a pan-Canadian network made up of researchers from many disciplines as well as folks from the cooperative sector. We are examining the social, economic, and environmental impact of the cooperative difference on communities across Canada. Each year we provide 6 free webinars that are open to the public. And the next one coming up will be next Monday, October 29th at 1 o'clock Eastern, again for an hour. And registration is now open if you'd like to visit our website at cooperativedifference.coop to register and certainly share it with your friends and colleagues as well. So that will be exploring the intersection of the economic and social elements of cooperation. And we've got Dr. J.J. McMurtry, who will situate cooperatives in the social economy, and also Dr. Lori Mook from Arizona State University, who wrote the book, What Counts? Social Accounting for Nonprofits and Cooperatives. And she'll describe concepts of social and sustainability accounting and describe how co-ops balance this type of measurement and performance in tandem with their economic and business evaluations and decisions as well. We also invite folks at the end of the call or via our website and our email if you would like to let us know if you'd like to participate in an upcoming webinar. So now I'd like to introduce our featured speakers today. We've got Dr. Sonja Novkovic, who will be starting things off and really giving us a summary of what happened at the Imagine Conference and the Summit. Just to give you a bit of background on Sonja, although I assume for most of us she needs no introduction, she is a professor of economics at St. Mary's University, and her research interests are in the field of labor-managed and cooperative firms and comparative economics. She was one of the organizers for the Imagine Conference on cooperative economics, and so she was well involved in all of the organizing. Certainly, some of you know her because she teaches within the Masters of Management for Cooperatives and Credit Unions program at St. Mary's University. And she's also served previously as president of the International Association for the Economics of Participation, and has also served as vice president for the Canadian Association for Studies in Cooperation. She also teaches courses in economies of transition, microeconomics, development economics, and also the emerging global economy and society from a cooperative perspective. So we're very pleased to have Sonja with us today to get things started. We also, following Sonja's presentation, Fiona Dogood, who is a research officer with the Canadian Co-operative Association, and also myself, Erin Hancock, who is program coordinator for research and education with CCA. We will be presenting 3 of the main studies that were delivered during the summit. So Sonja, I'd like to turn the screen over to you now. And I would like to, if folks have just recently joined us, please press *2 to mute your line so we can keep the audio as clear as possible. And we'll prompt you at the end to unmute. So again, go ahead and send questions via your GoToWebinar menu to CCA Webinars, and we'll keep them for the end. We'll also prompt you to unmute at the end to join in the discussion. Over to you, Sonja.
Thank you very much, and hello, everybody. I understand some of you have actually been at the conference, so if I'm missing something, please let me know, and all of us on the call. And thanks, everyone, for joining us. It is my great pleasure to tell you a little bit about the conference because the feedback we're having is really very, very positive. And I just want to, as a way of introduction, tell you how we what the vision for the conference was, and that's why I'm listing the speakers, even though you will have them on. If you go on the Imagine 2012 website, at the bottom of this page, you will see who the speakers were and all that. But I'm highlighting them just to tell you that the speakers were invited because of the work they do. So only the ones with stars next to their names actually knew anything about cooperatives or had done research in cooperatives. So this is the front page, and again, you will see, the titles and of the speeches and so on. But basically, we invited people to talk about the criticism of the existing economics paradigm, people who are working on the ecological economics, on alternative measures of progress, on income inequality, and prosperity and growth. And then we had the second page, if it turns. Sorry, technology here. Okay, here it is. More stars here, so more of the people who actually have done work in cooperatives. But Avner Ben-Ner, for example, was invited because of his work in behavioral economics, and he came with lessons from behavioral economics. And then we had others, again, who have not done work previously with cooperatives. So what we wanted was to have a set of presenters who are going to tell us about their work and whose work actually fits well with the cooperative values and principles and cooperative kind of organization. And I think really it was a great success because in the end, our audience in the cooperative sector, I think, saw very well where cooperatives fit. I know it was an experience for me. I've learned quite a bit from the presenters, quite frankly. So here goes. The message of the conference in the end, I think, is that it's a time for a new economic paradigm. It is not a new message, but it was one that came clear throughout the presentations. Pretty much everybody was talking about values and the need to shift values in the way we look at the economy and society. And then we tied it in with the cooperatives and their role in this new economic paradigm and the new economy because they're bringing an organization with defined values and principles, as you all know. So the key lessons from the presenters, I grouped them into two groupings, right? One was the limits that we're facing today in the economy that we have, and the other, the outcomes of the last 50 years of the economy we have. Global economy is what we're talking about, global economics as a field of study and global economy as such. So limits to growth came clear, and to what the economy has been about in the last 50 years, starting from the resource limitations. So we're living on a finite planet, and there's a lot of research done on those issues, as I said, in ecological economics. We're in ecological overshoot, and this came clear in the presentations. And we were also witnessing presentations on the exponential growth that cannot be sustained, and obviously because we are relying on fossil fuels. So there's some work basically done on decoupling or separating growth from the fossil fuel reliance, but still growth as such, you will see, I will point out, is criticized from another angle as well, and that's finance. The outcomes of the last 50 years were in the other groupings, the concentrated wealth and entrenched power, the inequality and the increase in inequality and poverty, the damage we are doing to the planet and the society, and following political instability and conflict. So that's pretty much where we are. So this is one. I'm using some of the pictures from our presentations, but you have all the presentations on the website now. If they're not there right this moment, they should be today or tomorrow. This is one from Bill Rees, where he showed the ecological footprint that is surpassing global biocapacity. There were many stark pictures, but this is one of them. The world in overshoot is another thing that Bill Rees showed us, which is how many planets we need, basically, for our activities, to sustain our activities. And we've been depleting natural capital, as you probably all know, since 1980s about. And he there says that the overshoot day for this year was in August. And since August, we've been depleting the planet with continued economic activities. Now, this is followed by a financial overshoot, and the financial overshoot, I was quite impressed with this slide from John Fullerton, where he basically shows that we're using the planet to fuel the economy, to fuel the finance as an end in and of itself. And he's asking in this slide, what's wrong with this picture? And basically then flipping it the other way, as it should be, the desired outcome, that finance serves the real economy in order to actually sustain the planet. Other outcomes that are quite depressing, there's plenty of evidence from Richard Wilkinson. This is one of his slides, based on the book that he co-authored with Kate Pickett in the UK. It's called The Spirit Level, and you may have seen it. But basically, he shows that income inequality is connected to deterioration in pretty much everything in society, from health to human capital to social relations. There's a clear connection in the data they've gathered, quite impressive, that actually show that the higher the income inequality in an economy, the more of all of these problems an economy will have. So pretty much all of our speakers talked about the limitations of neoclassical economics, and in particular, because neoclassical economics has been actually supporting these economic developments, not only supporting but actually creating them. And we're also training future leaders to do more of the same. We have not changed the way we teach economics pretty much. If we talk about ecology, it is in a separate field. It's not in the mainstream, and the main teaching is in the micro and macro. So the basics in economics are still the same as they were like 40 years ago. Excuse me. So part of the problem is in the assumed economic behavior. I'm having a sip of water here. Economic behavior with purely monetary incentives. So we're talking about the homo economicus, humans who respond to monetary incentives, and we're separating that from any social variables. And the focus is on private ownership and on very narrowly defined efficiency. We're measuring success following from this logic with the growth of national income, gross domestic product or GDP, as one of the most important indicators of progress. There's, of course, plenty of evidence that GDP growth does not mean progress, but nevertheless, this is the variable we hear about and talk about, and the media are, as you all know, all the time talking about growth and health of the economy. So Manfred Max Neef, in an interview that we saw, because he couldn't make it, he didn't get a visa, so we showed an interview with him. He pointed out, and then others as well, that growth has limits, but development does not. And actually, I liked, he said, any living creature is growing up to a certain point, and from that point on, you stop growing, but you continue to develop. So, the analogy is that this is what our economies ought to do as well. Financial capital as an end in itself is also something that came clearly through the presentations. And then the debt trap that we are in, from the government and, from household debt, private sector debt to government debt, fueling, again, the financial purpose. This is a picture from Ron Coleman's presentation, basically showing that the growth of GDP does not necessarily imply genuine progress, and he uses the genuine progress indicator to show that GDP and genuine progress in the 50s and 60s were moving up in parallel, but at some point in the 70s, the GDP continued to grow, but the progress didn't. So, and again, there's plenty of evidence that shows the same thing, and that Bill Rees also pointed out in his presentation. This is from Neva Goodwin, basically comparing making a point that we need a new economy, a new economic theory, and she's setting the stage for comparison of the 21st century economics that we need to the one that we're teaching right now. 20th century economics, and basically making a case that we need an economy that is socially, environmentally just and sustainable and satisfying, compared to one where economic goals are growth and maximizing consumption, which is what we have now. The economic scale remaining within ecological limits, where right now we're talking about growth that is always desirable. We need to understand an economy in its social and ecological context. Now it is a standalone system, and both the future constraints have to be recognized, and human values should be appropriately recognized. Right now, they're all supposedly captured in the prices in the market system.
Can I pause you for just 1 second?
Yeah.
We've got a question from the audience if you can define GDP and perhaps genuine progress indicator as well.
What's the question?
If you could just give us a bit more information explaining what GDP is and what the genuine progress indicators are.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm assuming that everybody will look at those presentations we had, but sorry. Okay. So the gross domestic product, or the growth in national income, is an indicator that's used by macroeconomists. And again, that's, if you hear on the news that the economy is growing, this is the figure they will give you. Gross domestic product is simply a figure of economic activity measured in the market. So if you have some activities that are not measured, that are not captured by the market, or exchange that did not happen in the market, would not be captured in the GDP figures. But GDP also does not account for any negative impacts. So, for example, if the examples were given to us at the conference of prisons, right? If you have an increase in imprisonment of the population, what you would catch in a GDP measure is the number of jobs created in the prison industry. But you wouldn't catch the negative side of it, which is obvious. Same thing with environmental damage. You would not capture any negative. This is the externality. It's outside of the system. But you would catch everything that's, again, the jobs and activities created to clean up, for example, right? So a natural disaster is good in a way. So GDP is simply measuring market activity. It doesn't go into the negative sides and the losses, environmental or social. The genuine progress indicator is devised to actually include all the negative externalities, right? So in the GPI measure, in the genuine progress measure, and you can look up at genuine GPI Atlantic. That's where Ron Coleman is. Actually, he's heading the GPI Atlantic. They have specific data and specific ways to measure. So indicators have been developed and it can be used, where in fact you show the negative aspects of a market activity. So, and the ones that are not measured by the market. So you would catch the, again, time use and stress, and you would catch also the damage to the environment and so on. Okay, so I'm moving down to Neva's statements about what we need in the new 21st century contextual economics compared to the one we are having now. There's the last bit there, and that's the one that she focused the most on, as you will see in the presentations if you look them up. She's talking about the work, the way we treat work in economics is that work is always negative, and that the way to capture the positive sides of work is through leisure time. So leisure is good, work is not. Whereas we need to recognize the work's social value, that a job lost is carrying a little bit more than just, you lost an input in production. Okay, so, and please, yes, stop me again if I'm rushing through this. All right, so Bill Rees also stated that we have a challenge to shift economic policy from one that's now focused on efficiency and growth, which is merely getting bigger, and as I said, it's getting bigger in the market activities, toward equity and development, qualitative improvement, and getting better as societies, and again, mindful of the planet. The underpinning values of society, he said, must shift from competitive individualism, greed, and narrow self-interest, which is how we define human behavior in economics, toward community cooperation and our collective interest in survival. So that, in a nutshell, is where the presenters were coming from and what they were discussing. The presenters who have not done work in co-ops. We had others who have, and they came in with, all right, where do cooperatives fit, and where is their place in the new economy? What do they have to bring to the table? So the context now for everything that they said about, the negative impact on society and the ecology and so on, our social movement and current context also speaks to the value of democratic organizations such as cooperatives. So we know that in the social justice arena we have renewed demands for, again, occupying spaces, occupying jobs, the right to work. It's happening from Europe to South America to this continent. We are seeing redrafting of the social contract and redefining the role of government. Quebec, I think, has is a proof of this kind of tendency. Democracy, political and economic democracy, is on the table again. We hear that people and the planet should be put before capital and concentrated power. So we want to limit the voice based on wealth and increase the voice based on representation. These are, again, demands in many parts of the world. And we hear calls for different economic and political institutions where we want people-centered economies and systems. We're talking about the common resources that are limited and should be commonly owned and managed rather than privatized. And we have evidence in Elinor Ostrom's work, most notably, but in others as well, that private ownership does not result in socially optimal solutions. So this is simply a context for calls for alternatives, and we have been very, very quiet about the alternatives. In economics as a field, we have not offered any alternatives, and in business classes, I suspect we haven't offered many alternatives either. So where do co-ops come from? All of you probably know what their advantages are, also what disadvantages might be. But this slide is actually coming from Stefano Zamagni. He didn't have slides per se, but what he was talking about, among other things, was why have cooperatives disappeared from economics? And he is an economic historian. He actually is teaching history of economic thought. And he basically put it into two categories, and I quite like that: anthropological error and methodological error. Those two types of errors are guilty of for economics not treating cooperatives, either not treating them at all, not considering them at all, or considering them with an erroneous outlook. So the first part, the anthropology, is that we, now have evidence. Well, we've always kind of known that common sense is your evidence, but in economics now we have evidence that humans don't behave as Homo economicus necessarily, and this, of course, has policy implications and implications for the incentives that we use. There's more evidence that if you, for example, bring money into the equation in an activity that used to be simply voluntary, right, that you are actually going to lose, you will crowd out, as we call it, the voluntary aspect of it. So incentive structures have to be changed and policies have to be changed. There's also evidence of this in the stewardship for the agricultural sector and so on. And the second, the methodology part, economists have misinterpreted cooperatives due to the prevailing assumptions in neoclassical economics and inadequate methodology to capture their socioeconomic character. And the whole thing started with 1958 paper, or actually a PhD thesis by Benjamin Ward. And we've had 50 years of pretty much work in econometrics proving that those hypotheses are wrong. So where are we now? Cooperative economics. Well, we think we need to move towards the development of socio-ecological economic theory and policy, and that in that socio-ecological economic theory and policy, cooperative kind of organization has a critical role to play. So what do co-ops have to offer to this kind of a framework? We've concluded the conference talking about basically all the elements that cooperatives have as an organizational form that fit with these outlines of the economy that is sustainable and mindful of society, social impact, and income inequality, and the environment. So we're talking about cooperatives as economic self-help, cooperation. They're governed by self-defined rules, which again is the work of Elinor Ostrom and her co-authors. We need to develop, we're developing governance methods and tools to assist democratic governance processes, so this is something that's valuable, and we need more work to do there. What do co-ops have to offer? Well, joint ownership, common pool resources through the principle of solidarity, building non-divisible reserves to mitigate risks. Limiting the return on financial investment. Cooperatives have a big role to play in actually understanding financial capital as a means to a different end rather than an end in and of itself. In internalizing the externalities, which simply means avoiding ecological and social costs, those negative impacts, as opposed to inflicting them and then paying a penalty, which is the market solution. So cooperatives can in fact include in their accounting and in their behavior those kinds of negative impacts, and many do. Actually, their purpose is to serve the underserved members. Coupling economic goals with social benefits or positive externalities is another place where cooperatives absolutely have something to offer. And we all know that we're making a statement that cooperatives are not simply using as a marketing plot their corporate social responsibility, if you will. So those social benefits are actually entrenched in or embedded in the cooperative model. What do co-ops have to offer? They're locally entrenched. They use growth. This was a very critical, these two things. How do cooperatives grow? So they can offer a spin-off growth model, and some of them do. Mondercon does that well, and there are many others, where in fact, because you want to stay local and small scale or smaller scale, you can spin off another cooperative that is then your sister co-op that you can work with. And there is no competition, but there's cooperation in this kind of model, right? Again, just us here in Nova Scotia has a spin-off financial co-op and educational co-op and so on. So there are plenty of models out there of spinning off cooperatives. And then networking to reach those scale economies that are so important. And there, again, because of the democratic governance, you need to stay close to the membership, so subsidiarity decisions taken as closely as possible to the member will ensure that actually cooperatives would stay in touch with the members, right? So influencing, another thing that co-op sector or co-ops themselves have to offer is influencing new measures of progress at the micro level, the triple bottom line, and that feed into then macro level measures such as the genuine progress indicator and the gross national happiness models that Bhutan is now putting into place, for example. So these measures are built on the values and principles of cooperation, and that's something that, again, cooperatives can lead in. The challenges, of course, are internal and external. I'm sure there's many more, but these are very, very critical in the context of what we've heard at the conference and at the summit that followed. Effective democratic cooperative governance is still something we need to work on. Cooperatives are emulating and copying what governance models are out there in the corporate sector, and it's not serving us too well. So we need to really understand what it is that cooperatives need to get out of the governance and not listen to what we're told is, the issue of control and governance, effective governance models where separation of management from member control is, and so on. So each type of cooperative obviously will have different issues, but for the most part we're adopting the hierarchical governance really that isn't quite fitting with many, especially not worker cooperative models. And then the capitalization issue. It turns out that there's plenty of evidence that access to capital is a smaller problem for cooperatives than is access to the right kind of capital. So especially with huge cooperatives, capitalization means accessing speculative capital, and that's a problem. So for the whole co-op sector, building funds and kinds of kinds of capital that we can use then to not grow and not expect maximum return on and not speculate. So this kind of capital is really critical. And then the external regulation, of course, because regulatory environments are pushing, particularly financial co-ops, into mergers, and that's seen as one way of growing. And then the other part of the challenges that are external are the misconceptions that are out there. So we need to raise awareness and do a lot on the promotion of co-ops, which, again, from schools and education onwards is something we need to do. And I think this is the last slide, basically saying there is a role for the cooperative movement in this, where because there is this structure that we have, because cooperatives are based on some clear rules and regulations and are networked in a very defined way, well-defined way, we're well positioned to actually engage in global cooperative development from, having resources, tools, and methods, increasing co-op density, because the more cooperatives are present in regions, there is, again, evidence that those regions are, in fact, growing in more quality, but also with more quality, but also that there is actually positive social impact. David Erdal came with that presentation. There's positive social impact and clear positive health impact on the populations where cooperatives are more present. The expertise in democratic governance and coordination is another thing we can offer. And then the independent cooperative capital reserves have to be built. That has to be on a large scale than the national capital reserves, even though national would help, right? Italy is doing well on that, for example. But it's on patient capital and ethical investments that the sector has to move to. And then the regulation is where the ICA can help, and redefining economic success on a finite planet is something we all need to do. So redefining economic success will take a lot in terms of the mainstream teaching of economics today. And I'll end with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonja. I think you gave us a lot to chew on, certainly towards the end of this webinar. When we open up for questions and discussion, it will be really good to hear more about concepts that you raised, such as patient capital and gross national happiness and that sort of thing. We also have already had a few questions come in from the audience, so we've stirred up some good thinking on this. So thank you for getting us moving. So now we will. We wanted to take this opportunity, since we're reflecting on the summit and also on the Imagine conference, to present, at least share with you some of the studies that were there. Now, we're not the people that wrote these studies, so we're in no way trying to report with great expertise, but what we do want to do is highlight some of the findings from these studies in the spirit of disseminating the research, and also further this discussion post-summits that we carry forward some of these ideas and discussions after that big event. So we don't intend to reproduce or replicate the studies, but we have included a link here on your screen where you will be able to link to these 3 studies that we will present from Deloitte, Ipsos, Reed, and UCAN, and also McKinsey, that were commissioned by Desjardins for the summit. But you'll also note on that link that there are several other reports that were also presented and shared. So there's lots to read. We hope that this whets your appetite, so you go ahead and read the full report and understand the full context for the research that was done. But we'll start with Fiona, and she's going to present the first 2 studies, and she is the research officer with the Canadian Co-operative Association. So Fiona, over to you. And for those of you who have joined, please press *2 to mute your line. And when Fiona and I have finished presenting these research reports, then we will open it up to questions and discussion. So keep them coming in.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Erin. I'll just jump right into it. The first study that I'm going to report on is the Deloitte study, and it's called Funding the Future, Emerging Strategies in Cooperative Financing and Capitalization. The issue that they are tackling in this particular report is of the post-2008 economic crisis that has negatively impacted the ability of all commercial organizations to achieve adequate funding. and in particular the unique structure of co-ops that further complicates this reality. A few comments on methodology. They did a survey of 36 co-ops who responded. They also are from the largest co-ops. These are co-ops in the $2 billion revenue range and from 4 different continents. So that gives you a sense of what who has responded to this. They're also within the forestry and agriculture, banking, insurance, and consumer industries. So it's a limited number of industries as well. They did some follow-up interviews with 5 of these co-ops, and then they're also drawing on their experience serving both co-ops and what they're labeling as traditional enterprises. So the context, according to the respondents, is the following. The impact of the economic crisis is real. 65% reported that the global crisis has had a negative impact on assessing, financing, and capitalization. They also reported that financing priorities are changing and shift to organic growth and operational efficiency as drivers of funding needs. They also reported that regulatory pressure is intensifying, so the degree of uncertainty around regulatory change. Access to funding is also a priority, and this is one of the top 3 strategies for 68% of the respondents. And then finally, especially for co-ops, the challenges related to the co-op structure continue. So this means significant dependence on surplus and earnings, balancing interests of diverse stakeholder groups, and also the limited ability to raise capital within the membership base. So given that context, where will co-ops have to turn to, or where are they already turning to find funds? They're turning to a diverse array of financing options. They are increasing the use of external funding. Debt is being diversified internationally. Consolidation is being employed as a capitalization strategy, including mergers, acquisitions as a tool for meeting their funding needs. And co-op principles are being used to improve access to funding. So longer-term strategic and operational focus, member economic participation, and more cooperation amongst co-ops. Deloitte has pulled out a number of recommendations for co-ops. One is to review capitalization needs to ensure that sufficient funding is being raised. Access historical financial and capitalization strategies to determine their suitability for meeting future needs. Updating funding plans, expanding the range of financial tools to diversify the sources. Educate members and investors on implications of internal versus external funding strategies. Engaging regulators to ensure that the unique structures of co-ops are reflected in the new legislation or regulations. And strengthening governance processes with respect to cooperative strategies, risk profiles, and operations. So to conclude the Deloitte study, they have stated that to succeed in both funding and assuring their futures, it is imperative that co-ops focus on their core business and value proposition to create a distinct and sustainable advantage. I'll now turn to the second of the 3 studies that Erin and I are going to present. This one is the Ipsos and UCAM study. It's called The Cooperative Movement, a global research study on perceptions towards cooperatives. As the title has indicated, this issue is the issue that they're tackling is around investigating perceptions of co-ops. And their methodology is focus groups. They did 10 focus groups, 5 of which were from with members from co-ops, and 5 of which were from non-members. They held these focus groups in Quebec, Manchester, Paris, Buenos Aires, and Tokyo. One of the main things that they did in this was a SWOT analysis on members and non-members' perspectives of co-ops, and I'll just pull out a couple of the highlights there. In terms of strengths, we can naturally walk towards a couple of these. Honorable and respectful business model. Customers are more proud to shop there. Business model benefits society. They can save jobs and come to the rescue. Better service, more attention to customers. If we turn to weaknesses, one of the main ones was around more expensive products or services, less money for R&D, so therefore less innovative, do not promote or advertise as much, and difficult to generate sufficient financing, and then also not always clear who is a co-op or what is a co-op. To turn to the opportunities, again, these we can naturally put our minds to. The trend of local buying is an opportunity, green attitudes, and the higher costs of living. To move to the threats, community ties are becoming weaker, greedier and a more capitalist society, more individualistic society, cheap foreign labor, and the growing size of cooperatives. They also tapped into some of the reasons for membership and then reasons for non-membership. 50%, in terms of for membership, 50% of the respondents they labeled moralists. This means that there is a belief in the co-op principles. Then the next highest was service or product seekers, and these are people who put a premium on products. And then the deal seekers, which I think is aptly titled, and then the lifers. These are people who had grown up with the model. The reasons for non-membership is, with 50% as the highest, the deal seekers. So the co-op is not seen to be the best deal or perceived to have the best deal. Then we also have the second highest, which are the skeptics. These are people who don't really believe that the promises that co-ops make. And then we have the people who are unfamiliar with co-ops, and then the people who are just plain unaware. So then what does all of this mean? There are 4 key insights. The first one is the too good to be true perception. So it's very difficult for people to believe or even conceptualize that a company could stand for democracy, community involvement, sharing profits, yet still manage to become a multi-million-dollar organization with thousands of members. Something will have to give, and it's not the profits, and so therefore people are skeptical about the social side. Thus, co-ops lose their credibility. While regular corporations unapologetically exist to maximize profits, co-ops have set a higher expectation, and as such, their community involvement needs to be communicated very strongly. The second key insight is that co-ops have been too timid in marketing their co-op difference and themselves as a cooperative. The third key insight around perceptions about co-ops is that they have not modernized. So there's an antiquated view of what a co-op is, and that people like the idea of a co-op but don't actually believe that they exist, sort of quote-unquote, adhere to the principles, and so are left making the purchasing decision solely on the price point, of which co-ops are perceived to be higher than traditional enterprises. And then the fourth key insight, many of the perceived strengths of co-ops were the intangibles, so things like pride, doing the right thing, and supporting the community. However, the weaknesses were often the tangibles, so less investment in marketing or in R&D, which makes products or services more competitive. These intangibles are easily copied and, again, maybe quote-unquote soft. And co-ops, however, co-ops can capitalize on this by using their sort of cooperativeness to their advantage. Erin, I'll turn it over to you to talk about the McKinsey.
Thanks so much, Fiona. So this is the last study that we wanted to share today, but again, I'll remind you that there are several studies that you can review, and these also in full on the Summit website. So I'm going to share with you the McKinsey study on cooperatives, and this is a compilation of several studies, several articles that comprise this report. So I just wanted to share highlights from a few of them today. The first article is entitled How Cooperatives Grow, and it's by Vincent Berube, Andrew Grant, and Tarek Mansour. And in this study, they looked at 47 co-ops and 54 publicly traded companies. And they found growth to be similar in co-ops and these publicly traded companies for the period of 2005 to 2010. But co-ops were more successful in gaining market share. The study suggested this is because co-ops have a proximity to their markets, which are their members, of course, and that member engagement. Co-ops did worse than their publicly traded company counterparts in portfolio momentum. And portfolio momentum is the growth in revenue that a company will see through market growth of their businesses in their portfolio, such as entering new fast-growing markets. Co-ops are seen to do more poorly in this area because they're more focused on serving their members' current needs rather than attempting to get into new markets or innovating new products. They suggested that growth opportunities for co-ops could include delivering a unique member and customer experience, growing in peripheral markets adjacent to their current business, and they could do this in tandem with serving their current member needs. And also, there were several other opportunities for growth mentioned in the study, so I would encourage you to go back and review that. The next article is Improving the Cooperative's Agility by Vincent Berube, Eric Lemaire, and Scott Rutherford. And they surveyed 600 employees from 9 co-ops and 4,133 respondents from 136 publicly traded companies. But they also interviewed 50 senior executives from co-ops across the world. I think someone's just joined us. If you want to press star 2 to mute your line, you can avoid the background noise. Thank you. So in their study, this study, Improving Cooperatives' Agility, they highlighted that co-ops excel at organizational alignment and employee mobilization. And they suggested that perhaps because of the service orientation that co-ops have as opposed to a drive towards value for the shareholders. So the co-op values and the co-op structure create a sense of purpose for the people that are involved, so employees and members, and throughout the governance as well. They found that there was higher customer satisfaction in credit unions rather than other financial institutions. But they suggested that there's an agility challenge. So when they were talking about organizational agility, they were thinking about an organization's ability to take on new directions, respond to change, and take up opportunities. And so they said within co-ops there's this agility challenge. So co-ops tend to be less consistently able to track their business performance that can lead them to be more agile. And they think this is possibly due to the consultative leadership practices that are often employed in financial co-ops, but also the slower pace of the democratic decision-making. So to increase organizational agility, they suggested to find more efficient ways to consult with the members to improve performance measures and performance management measures so that the areas of underperformance can quickly be addressed, and also to clearly define the roles of the elected directors versus the hired executives. They also suggested that in order for co-ops to improve agility to pursue new opportunities, they can have more external reviewers involved in evaluating the organization, and then they can create systems to finance new opportunities as well. And again, there are more suggestions for organizational agility that you can find in that study. In the next article, Change is an Opportunity, Cooperative Banks on the Cusp of a New Era, the authors were Pierre-Ignace Bernard and Jonathan Tetreault, and they suggest that cooperative financial institutions should consider their social media activity when thinking about a means to stay in communication with the members and also eliciting communications back from their membership. As other financial institutions, such as pay service providers, threaten some of the financial co-op's business, the relationship with the members will be a defining feature in retaining those members in that business. They also highlight that co-ops have ready access to potential investors through their members. So when interest rates are low, co-ops can explore how to encourage member investment. In another article, Retail Co-ops, Staying Competitive in a Changing World, the authors were Tarek Mansour and Andrea Zaki. And they suggested that as more and more consumers are choosing to shop online, even though they still do activity and some shopping in stores, co-ops will need to emphasize and capitalize on the advantage that they have with geographic proximity, so being local businesses. They will have to ensure that members and customers are compelled to visit their stores. So perhaps this is through providing expertise in a certain retail area, providing convenience, or high-quality service. They also suggested that co-ops might also benefit from expanding their activities into adjacent products or services in order to grow their businesses. Another report included in this study was the 5 trends and their implications for agricultural co-ops by Andrew Grant. And this study explains that as economic growth progresses in China and India and other emerging markets, there will be more consumers entering the middle class, which creates more of a demand for resource-intensive foods such as meat production. The study suggests that co-ops should consider whether they can benefit from linking more with these emerging markets through partnerships or getting more into value-added, high-value production. The study also suggests that co-ops should also increase their capacities in financial risk management and using advanced analytics to meet their member needs fully and to provide for the full breadth of grower needs in the agricultural context. In the report, How Great Companies Think Differently, Rosabeth Moss-Cantor shares that co-ops cannot forget their core purpose or service, including their desire to improve the lives of their members and the communities in which they operate. She suggests that great companies assume they can trust people and rely on relationships, not just on rules and structure, and that co-ops are a natural fit for this. And also she says to thrive, companies must build relationships with government officials as well as local suppliers and customers. So she really highlights the importance of relationships, which is often something we associate with the cooperative way of doing business. Lastly, I wanted to highlight the article, Another Way to Do Business, an interview with the president and CEO of Desjardins Group, Monique Leroux. And this was conducted by Vincent Berube and Eric Lemaire. And Monique Leroux was quoted as saying, "The irony is that today, despite advances that have been made to make banking widely accessible, many individuals feel more detached than ever from the financial world." And when she was asked if co-ops are an answer to this disenfranchisement that she was describing, she responded by saying, "If we look back to then, to the founding of Desjardins, as well as to now, we see people who felt and feel voiceless and without a mechanism to understand and influence some of the economic changes they need. Cooperatives tend to rise and flourish in periods of unmet needs, specifically the need to have a voice. They give individuals a means to be active and engaged in learning about the economy and in shaping their own financial outcomes by getting involved instead of waiting for governments or others to solve their problems." She also highlighted that, and this is a quote, we may not hit the highest highs as some in the private sector, but we tend to avoid the lowest lows. So I will encourage you again to go to those reports and to read those full studies, because there's quite a lot in there of interest, I think, to this group. So now what we'll do is we will turn it over to the audience, where we have some questions that have already come up, so we can take the last 7 minutes for a bit of a discussion. So I'll ask Réjean Lefebvre, if you would like to get things started, you can press star 2 to unmute. I think you have a question for Sonja.
My first question was about the awareness at our board of directors at cooperatives last week. People were quite impressed by the presentation made at Imagine, but they were saying how we're going to spread that new way to see and understand economics.
How we're going to spread?
Yes.
Okay. Well, again, it has to go from, teaching and education. And so we have to bring the model into the classes. That's all you can do. The books that need to be updated. And, again, there is a number of people who are in this field who have not contributed to those textbooks. So it is simply, it looks like a huge task, but we just need to bring it into the textbooks and give it the right treatment, because again, where it does exist, the treatment of it is really weak. So that's from my angle, but there's of course all kinds of other places where we need to go, and Ontario has done a lot for high school curriculums. You need to bring it into the high schools and so on. I'm sure others on the call have some ideas.
My second question was about the paper by Deloitte and the one by McKinsey. They seem to indicate that co-ops, at least the very large ones, should change and adapt to the capitalist world in their governance and also in their financing and capitalization, while what you have presented in the Imagine conclusions seems to see the complete opposite. So who should we believe?
Well, yourself, your gut feeling. Absolutely, you're right. And actually, PricewaterhouseCoopers has another study for agricultural cooperatives where they, in fact, say that among the capitalization options, number 4 is to simply demutualize, turn into another kind of company. And there you have it. So that's our option, of course. Right? So we can just demutualize and we don't then need cooperatives. So the question is, why do we need cooperatives? And if we do need them, we need to know how to avoid demutualization. That's the whole thing. And if, again, there is no reason to have co-ops, then we have no work to do. So, while their proposals are valid for some cooperatives, I suspect, and we have seen our, share of demutualizations, the question is for those co-ops that want to stay cooperatives, and they have their reasons to, how to access capital that is not going to fuel speculative capitalization, right? So do you access, again, venture capital, or do you access a different kind? And again, countries that have created the different kind, in fact, created something that social economy in general, and cooperatives in particular, can absolutely use and stay true to their identity. So you in Quebec have that, Italy has it, Mondragon system has it, and so on. We just need to, I think, pull together on a global scale to give options to co-ops who want to stay that way. So it should be a choice.
Thank you.
Réjean, this is Fiona. I too had a question of that similar nature. When I reviewed the Deloitte report, they claim to be the voice of the co-op sector, and I was wondering too if this was in fact the voice of the co-op sector.
So I'd like to turn it now to over to the audience. If you've attended or you have any reflections on this conversation we've been having today, you can press *2 to unmute your line and just introduce yourself when you start.
Hi, this is Greg speaking.
Hi, Greg. Can you give us your organizational affiliation, please?
I work with Human Resource Skills Development Canada.
Thanks. Go right ahead.
I have a question and observation. One thing I was amazed by was the scope of cooperatives globally. I heard one speaker say $1.6 trillion in revenue, equivalent to the 7th largest economy in the world. And I heard another person say they employed 100 million people around the world. So I was really very surprised by those figures. And I guess my question is, how well do you think small and medium-sized cooperatives were represented at the conference?
I can answer that. The small and medium-sized cooperatives were not represented well enough, and neither have the academics who are working in this field, neither have the students. So there were many, many groups that were missed. But in particular, you're right, small and medium-sized cooperatives were not present to the extent that would be ideal. This had the event, the Imagine 2012 in particular, had in mind the large cooperatives because they are the ones who are, in fact, very, very important in applying the principles and values of cooperation to what they do. And you've heard it already in the capitalization issue in particular. So we targeted that for the Imagine 2012 conference. That was our idea. That's who we wanted. Because for medium and smaller size cooperatives, there are fewer problems in staying true to your identity, at least from what we know. And so it's really the large cooperatives. There's this sense of principles getting in their way. And if they are, well, we need to have those conversations, and we need to understand why, and why do they stick to the cooperative model. And so then let's create, if capital is your problem, then let's create capital that will not be a problem for cooperatives. They're the ones who can do it. That's the whole point. So it was really, we targeted the big ones, and for the summit, it became prohibitively expensive to actually come to the summit. So it's so unfortunate. Manchester, that's coming up, is doing much better, I hear, and they're including really, that's, a huge, somebody said 10,000 people coming to Manchester, and it should be all-inclusive. It's simply what the point of the event was and what the message and who is going to move the agenda forward and where the issues are. That's why.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, Greg, for your question. I think we have one last question we can take. I did want to highlight on the screen there, we do have another webinar coming up you can register for at cooperativedifference.coop. But Justin Ellerby, did you want to introduce yourself and ask our final question today?
Hi there, Justin here. Yes, thanks, Erin. I am currently a student in the MBA in Community Economic Development program at Cape Breton University, and also was affiliated with the North American Students of Cooperation before. And my question is, given the complexity involved in the average consumer having to judge reasonably whether their large co-ops are actually staying true to their original co-op principles, and just the general lack of time that most consumers have to put into that sort of thing and how easily it is to manipulate those opinions, would it be efficacious or possible even to instead focus on educating the purchasers and consumers of cooperative goods and services that are a little bit higher up on the value chain, who already are putting a little bit more time into making those purchasing decisions?
Yeah, thanks for your comment. I'm sure again on this call there are people who would address this question more accurately than I would. But what I do know is that cooperatives themselves do a lot around education of their consumers, and the good ones, the cooperative group in the UK, for example, has done a lot to actually leave the space in the stores for the education. So as you walk in, you have your education first, telling you why they're a cooperative, what they do, excuse me, what kinds of products they sell, and so on. And also then what is placed how in the store is also different, and it fits the principles and the values. So yes, there's much more that we need to do on the education. Excuse me. Thanks for your question, though.
Thank you very much, Sonja and Justin. So I wanted to thank everyone for your contributions today. I wanted to invite you to stay on the line if you do have further questions for Sonja or on the reports that were presented by Fiona or myself, Erin, or if you want to have discussions among yourself, we can leave a bit of space for that. But for those of you who had just planned for an hour, I'd like to thank you for your time and your engagement. If you visit the cooperativedifference.coop website, later today we'll have these presentations up for you to access, and also the links to the reports. And then in a little while we'll also be able to share the video with you if you wanted to share it with colleagues or review some of the discussions. So thank you again to Sonja, and we'll let people exit now if they need to. Okay, great. So for those of you who have decided to stay, do we have more questions or comments from the floor?
I have a question. It's Mark Olbat speaking here at the CCA. I didn't fully, when we talked about the lack of research on cooperatives, you mentioned two reasons, anthropological and methodology, but frankly I didn't understand those 2 points fully, and I wanted to know if you could expand on them.
Yeah, it's not that there's research missing. There is wrong research that's out there. So basically, what Zamani was, so the questions that we asked him and we wanted him to present on, because again he is an economic historian, we wanted him to tell us why have cooperatives disappeared from economics, teaching really, and economic thought, because in the 20th century we've pretty much been swamped by the neoclassical approach, and that's all you've seen. So where have they gone? And he said, well, anthropology is one part of the problem, because in economics we have now run in the 20th century with the assumption that we just need to deal with the selfishness of human beings, that other sides of humans are dealt with in other fields. So, specializing in our own little niche, we have looked at the humans from that only the Homo economicus point of view. And when you have that, clearly, there is really little you can say about cooperatives except, now we go to methodology, the wrong kinds of things. He actually talks about the way we look at efficiency as that methodological misstep. But more than that, the research that has been done in economics on cooperatives started in 1958 with Benjamin Ward and his papers, where he basically assumed that people in cooperatives, so you will start a worker cooperative in order to maximize your own income. And there's your, again, understanding of humans, right? That if I want more money for myself, and therefore I will join with you because I can make more money for myself. So that's the model we have. And it resulted in strange outcomes, no surprise. And so what economists have been doing since then is pretty much trying to find evidence, data gathering, and this is data gathering in Italy, in France, in Spain, in the West, in the U.S., among plywood co-ops. All this work was done by fantastic economists, who really tried to find evidence that, yes, cooperatives, in fact, do maximize income per person, and they have these weird results, which namely is that if you as a co-op do better, like if there's high demand for a product, you will dismiss members, you will lay off members so that you can split the money among fewer. I mean, I don't have to tell you that just doesn't work that way, right? Anyway, so that's the research we've had. And again, people looking for evidence of the word model. So now, finally, I hope we're at the point where we've said, okay, we've had enough of 50 years of no proof of this, but we need to figure out new models. And among the new models, it has to be one that says, okay, humans are getting together for more than just their economic well-being or their financial well-being, right? And so behavioral economics is now a little bit more realistic about that. But still, we don't have well-developed models that are simple enough to use in the runs that we want, to prove different things and hypothesize and so on.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Do we have other questions or comments for folks from the participants in this webinar?
Justin here again. I guess I'd like to ask Sonja what you mean by educating consumers. Is that really going towards just sort of inculcating society as a whole with more mutualist values or more ecologically sensitive values, or is there a specific kind of message that co-ops need to be getting out there about their own specific business model?
Yeah, you know what? I wish I had the answers. I can just give you what my personal feelings are. So no proof for that, not based on scientific evidence. But what I did get out of the Ipsos study is that what are they calling them, Erin? Deal seekers, right? So you have 50% of deal seekers, meaning that 50% of consumers are shopping for a better price. And even among my students, like when I walk into a first-year economics class and I ask them what they think about Walmart, is the reputation good or bad, they will tell me, oh, it's good. It's great reputation. Why is it great? Because they have the lowest prices, right? And so in this culture, I mean, where does that start from? It starts from when the kids are born and what they learn in their households. I mean, and again, it's very complicated, clearly, right? And I wish we had a day to sit down and chat about these issues, because I'm sure you have some ideas as well. But bottom line is that if you are trying to compete on the price, then you get what you get, which is the scales of Walmart and the scales of consumer co-ops that have to be huge and so on. So if you cannot meet the price, then you have to educate people buying why it is that your product is more expensive. And I'll tell you, I buy coffee only from Just Us because I know it's fairly traded. Just Us is a co-op, and I don't care what they charge for that, but I can afford not to care. So you have, again, a segment of the population that cannot afford high prices. So we really have, in terms of consumer cooperatives, the issue is really, really layered and complicated. But unless we sit down and talk about it and figure it out and hear from co-ops that are doing well, because there are many who are doing well, and educate consumers that the fact that they pay a little bit more has an implication for the quality of the product they're getting. So unless we tie in how the product is being sourced to the quality of the product, it's really tricky. So consumer co-ops, I don't know what they can do. I really don't know, but this is some of the thoughts I'm having. How about you? Do you have any ideas on education?
Myself personally?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I personally always sort of go back and forth. I mean, I've been a lifelong cooperative ideologue, but I'm really uncomfortable with that as well. And I feel like on one hand, there's great proposition being made to the majority of consumers all across the world that co-ops are cheaper. They start, and that ideally that's the sort of mutualistic tendencies that you could find in those organizations should develop like more efficient value chains, and that I always hope that the moral imperative can kind of be folded into the economic argument of it. And that's maybe not as true as I would like. But all I know that most people...
Today I was reading something, I can't remember where it was, that we should put actually, among some of our NSU students, graduate students, that we should put on the price tags the ecological and social measures as well. So, how many kilometers did this travel to get to you, right? So it should be all out on the price tags. And unless we get that in the system, maybe that's something for co-ops to develop, your ecological footprint to get this product, how far away it arrived here from, and then the sourcing and the chain, where it came from and all that, should probably be right in the faces of consumers. So, again, education, awareness. So people just are not aware that all of these issues are upon us, right? In denial, that was Bill Reese in the conference was saying, that we are in denial because we kind of know all this. It's all out there. We've seen it. We just don't want to pay attention to it. So all of these are absolutely issues, but there are some great ideas. Certification, co-op certification was another idea that we've heard, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much, Justin. We do have one last question we'll take today from Peter Cameron. Peter, if you'd like to unmute by pressing star 2.
There we go. I am there.
Hi, Peter.
Again, just to reiterate about the whole issue of common branding, and in terms of marketing and education strategy, was there much discussion about that at the conference? Like Canada, common branding.
Was there much discussion about it at the conference?
Yeah, in any of the sessions.
Not really, because there wasn't, it didn't lend itself to that discussion. So we were not at the micro level talking about, the strategies of cooperatives necessarily. We were just talking about the big picture. So Imagine didn't come up with that. But then the summit had some specific, sections where they were relating it to specific types of cooperatives. So we had some governance discussions, and consumer co-ops were in one room. I don't know if anybody on the call was there, but I missed it, so I don't know what they were talking about. But no, Imagine didn't have that level. We were just pulling at the end where cooperatives fit with the proposed model of the economy. And so in that context, what we're talking about here is that the price has to include everything that is costing us, which is the environment and social costs, right? How do you bring that to a consumer who is looking at the price just from, just looking at the price, period, not thinking what's in it, but also companies who don't have to reveal what's in the price and they don't add the ecological and other costs, right? So this is the problem. So the whole system has to shift, really. But co-ops can be leading in that effort, and how do we lead when we have to compete with others who don't have to do it is really not easy.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for your question, Peter. So I think at this time we will wind down today. Thanks for those who stayed a little bit longer for the further discussion. Sonja, I want to thank you. I think this was a very stimulating webinar. I was fortunate enough to be able to attend Imagine in the Summit and still feel like I learned a lot from you today. So
that's good, yeah, because it's kind of hard to judge. You know, there's so much in it. It's really hard to, we need days.
We do.
Yeah, that's good. But thanks, everybody, for organizing it. I'm sure we'll have some ideas for future webinars from this.
Absolutely. So everyone, have a great day.